Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, and I'll have Julie, who's my invaluable helper, very, very valuable to me, helper. My name is Brian Ladd, and I taught middle school science for a couple of years, and then predominantly social studies afterward. Used TCI all 30 years in my classroom as a classroom teacher to some capacity, saw the entire evolution of TCI. And I've been training for the last 8 years, retired after 30 years of teaching. Love TCI, changed everything about my program and way I taught, and in fact, how social studies and even ELA was taught in my school. But we're going to focus on science today. Julie, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hey everybody, I'm Julie. Um, Home is Michigan, but I followed a boy and I'm currently in South Bend, Indiana. I saw a few Michigan people on here, and a couple of Indiana people as well. I started using TCI, oh my gosh, 25 years ago, in my elementary classroom. It completely changed the way I taught in every content area. I love everything about it, including the literacy and, frankly, the performance assessment. So, Brian, go get them.
Here we go. So today we're going to talk about performance assessments, and sometimes it's something that we get a little nervous about doing. By the way, here's the housekeeping. I assume all of you are good on this right now, so I'm going to go by it. If you need me to review anything, let me know. So we're going to talk about what are performance assessments. Um, and just in general, performance assessments in your classroom and types of performance assessments, because we have lots of different types of them as we go through. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. I'll have it open. Julie's going to monitor it for us. Julie's going to kind of give me a warning about 11:50, just in case. Sometimes I go long. Usually I go long. I talk a lot, so that we can make sure we get to the final points and questions and then be able to get you to wrap up and get your survey and all the other components as we go through here. So we're going to start off with our programs. Again, I had some of you earlier this morning. We have 9 different disciplinary areas of science. And some of them, typically, people will do sixth grade space science, seventh grade life science. That's what I taught. Eighth grade physical science. Some of you actually have created your own integrated by mixing and matching those. So you might have some physical science at the same year in seventh grade that you have adaptations and earth space. So we allow that your ability to manipulate and move them so it best fits your own curriculum. In many of the schools in California, as we call it integrated science, where we've actually integrated those disciplines for you already. Sixth grade doesn't include physical science because of the math, but all the rest are integrated as you go through sixth, seventh, and eighth. And there are some states that have actually, school districts that have adopted, and some other states using our overall integrated, so they didn't have to do it themselves. But we'll work with you on any way that you do that as we go through. So, what are performance assessments? First of all, quickly in the chat, write down the first thing that comes to your mind when I say assessment. Or I could use that evil word test. Yep, there we go. Test, quiz, test, evaluations, checking for, I love the checking for understanding, formative, etc. Check for mastery. Sweet. What this is, we're talking about, I love the show, that's a big TCI thing as we go through. We're talking about performance assessments. And students are going to create something, they're going to do something, they're going to be something as part of this assessment. To me, it's the ultimate and authentic assessment. I had, and you may have had these, you probably do have these students that knew everything in my class. They participated, they were active, they were engaged. It comes to it, the old style test, they're taking a multiple choice test, and all of a sudden they're in tears. They know everything, but they can't do a multiple choice test or an objective test. And then you'll also get kids who can do objective tests, but you're not sure about their understanding. To me, this performance assessment that we're going to talk about is a great way to look at an authentic assessment that is a cumulative unit assessment, because you're probably already doing checks for understanding and quizzes and within each section or within each lesson. But the performance assessment is a great way to assess the units in there. So as we walk through, I won't read all the things, but each unit is going to culminate. Again, these are unit performance assessments where students apply their knowledge and skills to solve a real world problem to the unit's storyline and anchoring phenomena. So remember, every unit has an anchoring phenomena that the lesson phenomena will tie into as we go through. Performance assessments will allow students to demonstrate their understanding of the three dimensions, SEPs, CCCs, and DCIs in NGSS learning. I know a couple of you are in states that don't do NGSS, but there's a close tie to them as you walk through. And then these are SEP, DCIs, and CCCs, science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts there. Performance assessments are alternatives to standard objective tests. I will emphasize this a lot at the end of a unit. They can also be used in addition to unit exams as you walk through. Why should we use performance assessments? Students are going to demonstrate an understanding of concepts through story-driven performance assessments. So we start open with the storyline, which I'll talk about, and they're going to show what they learned in each of the lessons and the investigations in this culminating performance assessment. These assessments are going to focus on real-life problems, conduct experiments, demonstrate critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Some of them will require kit materials, others will not. It depends. Every single performance assessment is different. Every unit has its own performance assessment. And I'm going to walk through three of those for you today. Students are not only assessed on what they know, but also on their ability to think like scientists. And to me, this is absolutely critical. I was really good at regurgitating, but I didn't really comprehend what I was learning. Once I actually dove into it as a student and I could do it, I had to think about it, I had actually problem solve, I actually felt really good about my learning. And a lot of our students like, is this on the test? Is this on the test? And they just write it down and they regurgitate. But they're not thinking. They're not thinking critically. And this is what we want them to do, especially with the performance assessments. It's really a more holistic view of student progress. It promotes deeper thinking, learning, and fostering essential skills for future science and scientific endeavors. By the way, it crosses the curriculum. It's just not for science, it's for everything. We need our kids to think and to really dive deep as we go through. Types of performance assessments, hands-on experiments, group projects, lots of presentations. So we're looking at Common Core components or speaking, listening, writing in here. They're developing models. They are rewriting those models, creating videos and brochures, proposals. One of the things I'm going to do today is about a proposal, modeling, and many, many more. It is not limited to one or two different components in here. The question I often get is, can I still give traditional objective tests and do this? Absolutely. There's multiple ways to assess our students as we go through. And unfortunately, as we know, when our students are tested, standardized testing, for a lot of you, that's eighth grade for the middle school, it is pretty much multiple choice with some thinking like a scientist if you have NGSS design questions there. So these are different types of performances. Again, there's more than I have listed here. With TCI, we always start with that anchoring unit phenomena. Then we move into the lessons. The lessons, each lesson has an investigation phenomena, has a lesson phenomena and an investigation phenomena, depending on number of investigations, one, two, or three. There's the different investigations. We have assessments, we have engineering challenges, and then we have the performance assessment. Again, this is going to wrap up the whole unit. So we're going to look at three different types of performance assessments, and we're going to go live. I know you don't all have the same program, but you can just get into a program or you can just follow along with me as you go through. But I'm going to look at, for sixth grade, integrated, for those who have the integrated, it'll be unit 4. If you're not in an integrated program, you're in a discipline specific, one of the 9, it will be cells and genetics. When I look at the 7th grade integrated, it will be planet Earth, which typically is the 6th grade, unit 4. And for 8th grade integrated, it would be unit 4 waves, designing a light show. If you're with me earlier, I introduced that just a tiny bit with my how to navigate component there. So we're going to go ahead and go live. And so I'm going to go into, it'll be 6th grade integrated, but I chose to go in through cells and genetics. And so this is what your cells and genetics would look like. Any questions yet? I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you, but what we want to do is get into the meat of it here. Any questions yet? Okay. So again, this is our page. We're going to go to the unit page because again, performance assessments are unit based. And I'm clicking on traits. And somebody said they love this particular one. For the person, and sorry, I forgot your name because it flew by. Can you write really quickly why you love this traits component? I know I put you on the spot big time. I'm going to show the intro video.
Madagascar is an island country in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Southeast Africa. Let's find out what makes it such an amazing place. Although Madagascar was once part of the African mainland, tens of millions of years ago, Madagascar broke off. This isolation allowed a unique diversity of plants and animals to flourish. In fact, 90% of the island's national wildlife is found nowhere else on Earth. You might have heard of the ring-tailed lemur, but did you know that there are as many as 100 species of lemurs in Madagascar alone? They range in size from the tiny mouse lemur to the 6-kilo sifaka. None of these lemurs exist in the wild anywhere else in the world.
I love these
Amazing
videos.
plants and animals populate the islands, such as this lowland streaked tenrec, whose barbed quills protect against attackers. Or this blue-legged chameleon who rests on a branch in the rainforest. The unique traits of these organisms allow them to survive in Madagascar's diverse environments. Madagascar has mountains, rivers, lakes, lowlands, highlands, and even the Indian Ocean surrounding it. In the center of the island are the highlands, where most of the Malagasy people live and where the nation's largest city and capital, Antananarivo, is located. Forests once covered this now urbanized area. Madagascar's rainforests are found on the east coast of the island, while on the west side there are needle-like mountains and canyons forming a unique habitat that rare species call home. My name is Dr. Nirina. I am an ecologist and guide. I've been
This is where it's going to start introducing. That was the introduction of the entire unit, but this is going to introduce the performance assessment at this point. It's usually in about the last 45 seconds.
hired by the government to help increase ecotourism in Madagascar. We need your help to plan vacation tours to Madagascar for foreign visitors. We want each tour to take tourists to 4 places where they can see a variety of plants and animals with unusual traits that helped them survive and reproduce in their unique environments. I will lead the tours that you plan. Proceeds from these trips will fund our efforts to help the plants and animals survive, such as our ongoing research of the giant land snail found in our tropical rainforests. So, for now, thanks for helping us preserve what makes our island nation so special.
And so that's the intro video. Even if we're doing the performance assessment, I'll introduce that. But the last 45 seconds to a minute of each one of the unit introduction videos introduces that idea of the performance assessment. Here in orange, I know some of you, I showed this to you before, unit progressions, explaining the anchoring phenomena. So we're explaining how each lesson goes back to this anchoring phenomena. And then for those of you who didn't see before, unit highlights, it tells you what not to miss as you go through this. So if you cover these 3 areas, your students will be able to do a performance assessment and meet those NGSS standards there. Everything in orange is for teachers only. Down below, what I'm going to focus on is a performance assessment. We're going to ask our students to do as a culminating unit activity is to plan a trait trek to Madagascar. And so I'm going to click on this. And this will open, there's a whole bunch of stuff here, but it opens this section. Right here, it tells me what materials I need. So I'm going to need glue, paper, pencils, etc. If it's a handout, I would need to print these out. It's in their interactive student notebook under performance assessments. By the way, all of this is also right here too. So if I click on materials, here are the materials I need. If it is something from a kit, there will be a picture of a kit. You hover over and it'll tell you which bag, box, etc. will fall in. So this is what they would need for this particular performance assessment. By the way, I'm often asked, when do I introduce a performance assessment? Introduce it at the very beginning. Tell them this is what we're ultimately going to do. This is what we're working for as we go through here. And here's the slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open into full screen. And Madagascar is a home to many. In the unit's performance assessment, you will plan a trait trek of Madagascar and create a brochure. So they're creating a brochure describing what travelers will see on their trip. For those of you who don't know, if I click on a picture, it will blow up and I can drag it around and I can actually look at all the really cool details here as we go through. Then I'm going to performance assessment requirements. What are my requirements? Including the brochure, 4 tour stops, a description of each organism. Here's the baobab tree, a description of at least 1 trait of survival and 1 trait for reproduction. Again, they'll have learned about survival and reproduction. And not only will they have learned about in this, they'll also learn about in 5th grade and in 3rd grade and in 1st grade. An explanation of why the physical or behavioral trait affects the chances the organism will survive or reproduce, and then a map showing their stops. So we are actually encompassing quite a few different disciplines as we go through. Then we talk about how to design their brochure. They're going to choose an organism, they'll describe the trait, they'll build the brochure with a front panel, a back panel, and other panels for a tour of where they're going. And then we'll have a sign up. They should have a sign up, just like a real brochure as they go through. So there'll be a sign up for the students. And then we ask our students, remember, anything in here is also in their interactive student notebook or online. And we ask our students to, with their group, they're going to choose 4 organisms, and at least one of them needs to be a plant, and list the organisms and the physical traits, the traits for survival, etc. And each person is going to be responsible for this as we walk through. Oops. And then we ask them to assess. Again, I didn't do this when I first started teaching, but I did after a couple of years. Give them that rubric ahead of time. Let them see the rubric. What do I have to do in order to get the 2 or the 1 as you walk through there? So what is it that I need to do? So we go through. It's simple, but it's to the point. And again, we're looking at all the information. And then we wrap up what are 2 kinds of traits. How can you tell if a trait is important to an organism? Did a trait guarantee the organism will survive? And does an organism have only 1 important trait? By the way, the plus signs open up answers. You don't have to show the answers, but a lot of our students aren't just auditory learners, they're also visual. So to see both really helps them as they go through.
Hey,
So,
Brian,
yes, go ahead.
to jump in for a second.
Yep.
Melanie is wanting to know, would students be allowed to go back to the lesson for information or only use their notes? And
Yeah.
if allowed to go back, how is that different than regurgitating facts? Great question.
Great question. And here's the answer. You may not be the answer. That's up to you on how you want to do that in your own classroom. For me, I want them to go back because that's part of what they're doing. And thank you for that, Julie. They're going back, they're looking at what they've learned, and then they're applying that application. And it's not just facts, but they're also going to have to there will be facts, but they have to describe, and they also have to give reasons why something would survive in there. Remember, they're also going to be presenting this too. You can do it in many ways. You can actually have where students are going in front of the class doing it, or you can have students circulating around the class. It's up to you on how you want to do that. I hate to say that, but really, all our classes are a little bit different. I have one teacher, a resource teacher, she just wants them to regurgitate facts just to get that information out there. Other teachers want, hey, go deeper. Give me something that's not in the writing. Do more research. So hopefully that helps you.
Can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
It might also be a great opportunity to show the difference between citing a source and paraphrasing.
Yep.
Or putting something in quotes. So as Brian said, you really have the flexibility. What do you want the students to be able to do in the end? It can go way beyond regurgitating facts, though.
Gabrielle asks about the assessment. That's really not this category, but really quickly, when you go to assessments and you hit create new, you just click, you can create lessons and you can add lessons onto the assessments. So you can add more than one on there as you go through. So you could actually put six lessons in one assessment if you want. So when you go to the assessment builder, also look under professional development. I'll walk you through it, but you just click on how many lessons you want. One word of advice when you create an assessment and you're doing multiple lessons, layer it, do lesson 5 first, lesson 6 second, lesson 7 third. Otherwise, you're going to end up with 180 questions and it might be really overwhelming for you. So assessments, and then just click which lesson you want to add to that assessment as you open it up there. Okay, so this gives you a little bit of an overview of Traits of Madagascar. It's a summary. Again, it's taking what they learned from the individual lessons as you went through, and then they're putting it together there. I'm going to now take you to any questions about that particular one. All right. I'm going to take you to it. It's a different type of assessment. In this type of performance assessment, they're actually going to be asked to look at proposals for bridges that will be presented. So I'm not going to play all of it.
Natural hazards
Actually, this is
such as
pretty short.
flooding, earthquakes, mass wasting, and volcanic eruptions may pose threats to your community. Some of these hazards can be predicted by precursor events that signal the likelihood of these phenomena. Other events occur with little or no warning. Records of past events can be used with maps to forecast the risk of future hazards. The effects of these hazards can be mitigated with building designs and planning. Infrastructure, such as bridges, are especially vulnerable to some of these hazards, and they are also critical for providing access to communities in an emergency. As a civil engineer, you will review data to forecast any natural hazards and recommend design criteria for 3 different bridges.
Okay, so very simple, very to the point.
Natural hazards such as flood.
In there. And so the storyline, your civil engineer who must decide how 3 bridges will be built at 3 different locations in Placerville, California. That's up by Sacramento, a little bit northeast of Sacramento. Each location may face different natural hazards over time. Your job is to review the data to forecast which natural hazards these bridges will face during their lifetimes. Finally, you will use the forecast to recommend design criteria. So what is the anchoring phenomena? Bridges in some, and this is the unit phenomena, bridges in some places risk damage or destruction from multiple natural hazards, including flooding, mass wasting, earthquakes, and even volcanic activity. In the Placerville area and a lot of the US, you can add fires to that too in there, which is a whole nother issue. And so these are our unit overview. These are SCPs or CCCs and the DCIs in there. And then as I go down again, I'm going to look at the performance assessment. And Patricia, I totally agree. It'd be a great performance for students to do, for parents and for others. Materials, sometimes it might be a showcase that you're doing. And I had one teacher, she took all these performance assessments and she did it kind of like a year and cumulative final, and different students picked different performance assessments throughout the year of what they had done, and they presented this as a showcase at the end of the year for admin, other teachers, and parents to come in and look at. So she thought it was the best cumulative year final she could ever possibly give, and the most authentic in there. Yeah, I wish I remember who gave me that, who told me about that. I love it. Teachers have the best practices ever, as we know. So handouts, bridge sites, natural materials, bridge types, interactive student notebook. Again, that can be found under materials. I'm going to open this up into full screen. Here's performance assessments. You've learned that bridges have different levels of importance depending on where they are and face different natural hazards. And I'm not going to read every word to you. The civil engineering firm Bridgeworks is looking for proposals for bridge designs. You will be analyzing data to determine the level of importance and natural hazards that might affect the 3 different bridges. In this performance assessment, you will recommend what kind of bridges should be designed at each site. Requirements, here are the 3 sites, the natural hazards at each site. And remember, I can click on, I can blow it up here. The summary, and then the reason you selected each. Obviously, if you're my students, I'd be going a lot slower. So we reviewed the bridge sites. So here's the bridge sites, handout A. And you can create one of these per group. It's in a PDF. And there it is. And it shows and it gives information about that particular site. So the students are looking at graphs, they're looking at charts, they are analyzing, they're looking at, hey, what needs to be done. So they've got to do some interpretation. By the way, this isn't something you say, okay, I'm giving it to you on Friday and it's due on Monday. It's something they need to be looking at as they're walking through the process. The natural hazard data, and then handout 3 are the bridge types that could be used. Beam bridge, arch bridge, suspension bridge. So these are the 3 types. You could also have students propose their own if you wanted to. It depends on how independent they are in their thinking. Then they follow the different steps. They have the spokespeople. I'm not going to blow this up again. Then we have again, our rubric as we go through. And so again, to create groups, you can assign groups. Everybody has a role, group spokesperson, a map analyst, and a hazard scientist. We make sure everybody has roles, they're assigned, and that's what they're responsible for. It doesn't mean they work independently, but they're ultimately responsible for that component. Then they would review the bridge sites, identify the hazards, choose the designs, and then be ready to present which design they believe is the best as they go through in there. Very quickly, questions on that particular one. So in the first one, they're creating a brochure. The second one, they're deciding which type of bridge would be the best proposal to help the community of Placerville, El Dorado County. Got another. Are there ways to alter assessments online to specific places around us? Yes, you can. You can edit any of the assessments. They're fully editable as you go through. I think one of these times we need a session here about assessment building and assessment creation too. So, but they're completely editable in there. Questions about this particular performance assessment? All right, I'm going to give you.
Hold on, Brian. There's
Go ahead.
the question here about recommendations for making the grading as fair and equitable as possible in group assignments.
Here's what I did. I would give, if I had a group of 3, I would give 30 points available. And then I would have the students divide the points as a group and then individually. So if it's Julie, myself, and let's say Win, so the 3 of us are in a group and I think we all worked equally, I'd give us each 10 points. But if I know Julie did most of the work, again, not all kids are like this, I would give her 12 and I didn't do much. I'd give myself 8 or 7. And so this is how I asked my students to evaluate as a group how students did, and then individually where this is between me and the particular student in there. So that's often is I found that students are pretty honest for the most part. Yes, you're going to have that student that says, no, I did a lot of work and they really didn't. So that's where you have to have that side discussion. So that's one possibility of dividing that. Does anybody else have ideas about how they, especially in group work, how they would assess fairly and equitably? It's always a challenge for us.
Brian, I'm waiting a moment to see if there are any other
Yeah.
suggestions.
Here's one.
Someone says, I sometimes have them record a short video on Canvas to show their individual understanding, but that takes time to make and to grade.
Yep. If I was doing this as like a year end type, one of I could also, or even if I do it anytime, I could also have a checklist for students to complete and I would sign off as they go through. That way I know they've done part A, B, and C as they walk through.
And one more question, are all of the performance assessments done in groups?
Yes, they are. Now, do you have the ability to alter that? Absolutely can, but there's going to be a lot of different roles that people have, and it'd be very hard for students to do it individually. I do know of a teacher who had a student that was out for 3 months, and that's how she actually assessed the student was on one of these, and the person did it on their own. Put their names next to the parts they completed for excellent. So we have a response from Tiffany saying she has students put their names next to the parts they completed for a group project within a format they could easily do. So that's a really good idea too. So they're taking ownership, and they might even say, "This is what I did, and this is who assisted me." Another idea that a colleague of mine had when she would do her groups, she'd always have the main person, the spokesperson, and the spokesperson would have an assistant spokesperson. So there was always that second person. Also, in case somebody's absent, there was a backup, kind of like an understudy. But that way, there's two people responsible and they're both looking at the same parts in there. Any other ideas? These are great ideas, by the way. I appreciate them. And if you don't mind, I'll continue to share them with other teachers as we go through. All right. I'm going to go over to the last one, and this is eighth grade integrated, or it's light waves, which often is at eighth grade. And this particular one, let me get rid of some of these tabs up here, and I showed the bits of this in my earlier ones, so you'll see the storyline is a local art gallery is installing a new show about light and its amazing effects. Create a piece of art for the show that conveys an artistic interpretation of key properties of light, such as reflection, absorption, transmission, refraction, and color. All of these are key vocabulary within this unit as the students go through. This is the intro, and I will play the whole thing. It's a minute and 20 seconds.
Like water waves, light is also a type of wave that you experience in the world around you every day. But if you pay close attention, there are many things that light does that you might not find so easy to explain. Have you ever wondered how you can see reflections in a window and see through the window at the same time? Why does the bottom of a swimming pool seem to move, but stops when you look at it from underwater? Why does a landscape look so strange through curved glass objects? Or what makes diamonds sparkle so much? Or why do rainbows form after it rains and near waterfalls, but rarely form anywhere else? Over the course of this
So again, these are all phenomena that students are going to be observing during the lessons and the investigations, but it's also something almost every student notices. So now with the
unit, you'll discover answers to these questions and many more. At the end of this unit, you will be challenged to use a few simple materials to design a stunning light art exhibit that clearly demonstrates some of these key properties of light waves. Will you be able to design and build something that is not only artistically pleasing, but can also clearly explain the science behind the amazing properties of light? Best of luck with this truly exciting challenge.
One of the reasons I picked this one out, because this particular one, you're actually going to go into the kits and you're going to use some of the materials that you'd use in the investigation. The other two, you wouldn't need the kits for. This one, you would need the kit. So the anchoring phenomena is that light creates effects that are not so easy to explain, such as making diamonds sparkle, making lines at the bottom of the pool appear wavy, and making rainbows from near waterfalls. And as we go down, I'm going to go to the performance assessment. And ultimately, we're going to design a light show art piece. So I go under performance assessment. I click on materials, but this time I'm going to click on materials over here. It doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm pointing and you're not in front of me. This will ultimately lead to here. So I'm going to click on materials. And as I go down, you'll notice there's a number of things that I need. So if I hover over the kit, it tells me it's in box 2, bin 2, and the bag of common materials. These, I'm going to need a whole bunch of lights and concave, convex, mirrors, mirror stands, etc. What I did when I do this is I put them in baggies. So everything's in a baggie, a large baggie, so that I can just easily hand it to my students rather than having to dig everything out. At the end, I'm hoping they put it all back in, and then I'll have it for the next time I go through. So these are the materials that they will need. They won't need any other handouts other than their interactive student notebook here. Go back. All right, so I'm going to go back to the performance assessment. Sorry, my internet's a little. So enter full screen. So they're going to show what they've learned. and they're going to put on an art show performance. By the way, they also have to write a script because people, I would have groups go from place to place, and the people would actually talk and demonstrate and tell us about absorption and reflection and amplitude, things like that as they go through. So, as a part of the museum presentation art piece, you'll write a script for an audio tour that explains each of the properties of light for their piece that demonstrates. How are you going to dazzle and delight the museum visitors? The performance assessment requirements. They're all right here. By the way, they're all written out in their interactive student notebook. If you don't have those consumables, you can print it. It's all under materials and can be printed out. So they want them to use the terms of reflection, absorption, transmission, refraction, etc. as they go through. And then they'll assign roles. Again, there's roles, so everybody has a different role as they go through. They're going to plan their art piece, write the audio tour. There'll be a map of your light art piece. In other words, what is each component showing? And then plan the presentation of the art piece. And then they'll follow the steps. We have a lead reviewer, a special effects designer, a script editor, and a host. By the way, what I found that everybody wants to be get involved. So with this, because everybody's saying, "Oh, this happens," and this is really cool because when I put the green light up, it's tending to absorb more so, and then when I put the clear one, it goes right through, or I'm making different colors that are reflecting off the concave versus a convex piece here. So we're assigning these roles. Again, you're going to see the students in this become very active amongst themselves. Here's your rubric. And then the wrap up. What properties of light did your art piece model? What I would do when students went from section to section, I actually had the students who were listening to the presentation answer these questions so that to determine whether or not they actually understood what was happening, what they were getting out of um, the presentation. It's a really, somebody wrote it, I'm about to say it. It's a really, really cool project. You could actually do this in one class period if you wanted to really make it brief. But again, introduce it. They're going to go into wavelengths and um, oh, Brian, your thoughts. They're going to there's two investigations here, and these two investigations will culminate with this whole project here. And again, it's a great way of showing my students that, or for my students to show me what they have learned. Yes, probably, most definitely, in addition to some type of objective or thinking type of assessment here. But we're continuing to add on as they go through. Questions about this particular assessment? Is different than the other two. Each one is, I picked each one because they're very different how they've done them, and I've done all three of these as they've walked through. Comments or questions? Has anybody, is there examples anywhere by chance? There are not examples, and I will tell you what's happening is we are starting to go into classrooms and starting to videotape and watching teachers do specific things so that we have something in there. Yes, definitely on the web. I actually have a couple of teachers who have done things on the web. I don't have it handy right now, but you could email me at, I'll put my email and I can send you those links to teachers who've done some of these things in there that they've done their own and they actually record it for other teachers in the districts, but I have their sites that they've given in there. But that's one of the goals of TCI right now, because we're redoing our K through 5 program. They're actually videotaping those first as they go through. So to be honest, middle school will be a little while in there. Another thing that's happening for your middle school teachers who didn't get less teacher guides or lesson guides, they are in the process of doing that within the next year. They should have completed lesson guides, teacher guides, other than the original ones or the ones that are online for the middle school teachers in there. I know they're almost done with aerospace science as they go through. Has anybody done any performance assessments themselves through TCI or other types of performance assessments and want to share what they did and what the experience was like? And, or how might you use one of these in your own classroom? So I'll throw out two different directions. If you've done it, give us an example. If you haven't done it, how might you do it in your classroom? How might you use this performance assessment? And remember, sharing is caring. Students complete a lot of hands-on lab experiments. Good. Haven't done much with the unit assessment because of time constraints is a big deal. Thermos. Excellent. Thermos. Excellent. And by the way, the one teacher that does that cumulative at the end of the year is because at the end of the year, she always found she had extra time where she didn't have that time before they went through all the process and testing, et cetera. And then she would have time. She said, let's do something fun, but they're still learning. 2 projects a year will incorporate the performance assessment. Excellent. You don't have to do one with every unit. It's really important to understand that. I would throw a challenge at you. If you're on a trimester or a semester, try one per trimester or one per semester. See how it goes from there. The cichlid performance, excellent. Engineering frog bat interactions. It was nice to have kids explain how they overcame challenges and reason through those problems. Very challenging for our kids to explain how they reason through the problems. That's excellent, especially looking at that criteria. There are no print teacher go back for middle school science. Originally, there was a lesson guide, but it was the exact same thing that was printed online. So they stopped the print material because teachers said they're not using it. So there is no physical teacher guide, but they are creating them right now. They're in the process, but they are online. So to find it online, if I go to materials and I go to, where did the lesson guide go? It's somewhere in there. Prosthetic hand is fantastic. That's an engineering design. So some people actually use the engineering designs in place of the actual hand. So if I was going to look for a lesson guide, come on, Brian, it would be here it is. It'd be right here. So that's the PDF version of that. Yes, in almost all units, let me go to the lesson, the unit overview, and let me go ways for transfer. So performance assessment is summative. It's more of a summative authentic assessment where these will have an engineering, which would be its own lesson. So there's lesson 7, there's an engineering design that they're learning, and then there's a lesson 8. So there's an engineering design within almost every unit in addition to the performance assessment. So they're two different areas. And the engineering challenges are cool. When kids are setting up their criterion constraint, and somebody mentioned the prosthetic hand, I take it and I just throw a lot of materials on the table and I don't even give them. They just have to grab and pick and they get too many and not enough. So, yeah, the engineering, the students really love, and that's part of that SEP too. Any other questions? It's just kind of a high, wow, amazing. There, by chance, a place or document, we're all, oh, they're not. I just want to check. I wrote them all out myself, so I know they're not.
Can I
Uh,
just jump in here though? That would be an excellent suggestion. Brian, you want to show them where to give feedback?
yeah. I'm just trying to, because they were talking about that. Um, no, that's not. Yeah. If you want to make a suggestion, and we do listen to suggestions, go to the question mark and put it under feedback. That is something that can easily be done in there. But yeah, I knew that from when I was doing this last year. I literally wrote out every single one of them and have them all listed on a piece of paper. I actually should submit it to them and tell them to do it in there. Yeah, you can do it, but it's also nice to have somebody do it for you as you go through there. I mean, my suggestion is go to unit overview. There's a performance assessment, and then down below your engineering would be right here. So you could see where the performance assessment is in the engineering is listed with the lessons there. So yes, and please give feedback, as many people as possible there. Okay, I'm going to go back to this slideshow because we're about to wrap up. And I know you've seen this before, but don't forget about PD. Lots of product updates. Some of you saw that we have, if your district opts in, there will be 6 different levels of AI reading to students. There'll also be an AI assessment helper slash creator. AI is not taking over your life, and that's our biggest fear as teachers. Facebook group, other social media, in-app PD. Don't forget about that. The in-app PD is right here. It can help you walk through a number of components. but probably most importantly, reflection. How did you feel about this session? I know it was quick, but getting an overview, 1 to 5, 1 to 6. I can handle 4, 5s, and 6s because I taught in there. Sometimes it's somebody put a 6. It's like, okay, this is something brand new I hadn't thought about. How do I fit it in there as we go through? So excellent, excellent. Okay. And then finally, or almost finally, second penultimate, you can be a TCI coach. We have TCI coaches. We train you, we bring you on. We help you to help others in your district in the area. So if you're interested, you can scan that. You can also go to the Teach TCI, TeachTCI website.com, and you can look at how to become a TCI coach with us. And lastly, don't forget to share your fun moment, hashtag TCI26. It enhances your chance for $50 gift cards. Excellent, Melanie. And then finally, take a screenshot of the survey. You take the survey, you'll get your certificate of completion, and that also enables a little extra chance for those $50 gift cards in there too. I want to thank you for spending some time in your summer. I know a couple of you have already started school or starting school right around the corner. I appreciate what you do. I finished my career at high school, and I'd always tell my high school kids, go back to your elementary, middle school teachers, especially Teacher Appreciation Week, because our kids always live in the moment. It's like, go back and thank your elementary, middle school teachers. They're the ones who got you there. So keep doing the awesome job you do, and we really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Don't forget to take the survey with the QR code there.